In the recent State of the Union address, President Trump laid out his vision for America. So today, we're going to do what we do best. We're going to check the record. We'll take some of the biggest claims from that speech and put them right up against the data. Let's get into it.
The whole speech, and it was a long one, was really built around this one super optimistic idea that America is right in the middle of a massive, historic turnaround.
The president made his case for what he called a turnaround for the ages. He offered a really strong defense of his administration's first year back in office, hitting on everything from the economy to immigration and trade.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How do these claims actually stack up against the facts? Let's take a closer look using data from government agencies and some independent analysis to see what the record really shows.
All right, first up, the economy. President Trump made taming inflation a real centerpiece of his speech, so let's dive into the numbers and see what's going on.
Now this line got huge applause, and you can see why. It's a clear, specific claim of victory over those rising prices that have been frustrating so many of us.
So how does that claim hold up? Well, the data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows core inflation has definitely cooled down, but the lowest point was actually reached 4 years and 10 months ago. So it's really close, but just a little shy of that more than 5 years mark.
And if we look at the bigger picture, you can see that the overall inflation rate has come down, but that's largely thanks to falling energy prices. The problem is the cost for essentials, things like food and housing, are still climbing by over 3% a year, and that really helps explain why so many families still feel that pinch in their wallets.
Okay, next up was immigration and the U.S. border, which has been an absolute defining focus for the administration.
I mean, that's about as definitive as a statement could get. The president declared that not only is the border secure, it's the most secure it has ever been in the entire history of the country.
So, what does the data tell us? Well, the analysis confirms that Border Patrol encounters have dropped to a 50-year low, which is a really significant change. But it's also true that illegal crossings, while way down, haven't been stopped completely.
And the policy muscle behind all this is something called the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, or OBBBA. It's pouring a staggering $170 billion into border security. What's also key here is that this funding is shielded from the ongoing DHS shutdown, meaning all those enforcement operations, detention, deportation, the border wall, they all keep going no matter what.
Now for trade. The president's aggressive use of tariffs as a central economic tool has sparked a major showdown with another branch of government, the courts.
Okay, let's just walk through this timeline because it all happened incredibly fast. Back in April 2025, the president used an Emergency Powers Act, the IEEPA, to slap on these massive tariffs. The courts immediately pushed back. And then, just 4 days before the State of the Union, the Supreme Court sided with the lower courts and struck the tariffs down.
And that was the president's direct response in his speech. Can you imagine? With the Supreme Court justices sitting right there in the room, he made it crystal clear he disagreed with their ruling, calling their involvement unfortunate.
So why did the court make that call? Well, it all came down to a fundamental idea, the separation of powers. The 6-3 majority opinion basically said that the power to tax and set tariffs is given to Congress in the Constitution, not to the president through some emergency act.
But even with the Supreme Court ruling against him, the president didn't just back down. In fact, he doubled down on his tariff strategy, making this really bold claim that revenue from tariffs could one day actually replace the entire income tax system.
To put that idea into perspective, let's just look at the numbers. Right now, the government is bringing in about $30 billion a month from these tariffs. Now, that's a ton of money for sure, but it's still a very, very long way from replacing the trillions collected through income taxes every year.
So how do all these different pieces, tax cuts, massive border spending, tariffs, how do they all fit together? Let's zoom out and look at the big fiscal picture.
The legislative engine driving so many of these changes is that same One Big Beautiful Bill Act. It's a huge bill that does a lot of things. It makes tax cuts permanent, it cuts spending on social programs like SNAP and Medicaid, and it pours all that money into border enforcement.
And here's the projected price tag for all of that. According to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, this one bill is estimated to add almost $5 trillion to the national debt over the next 10 years.
And if we look down the road, this level of borrowing is projected to push the national debt to 120% of our entire economy's annual output by 2036. To put that in perspective, that would be the highest level in American history, even higher than the debt we took on to fight World War II.
The CBO also looked at who this bill really impacts, and what they found is that when you combine the tax changes with the cuts to social programs, households in the top 10% actually see their income go up, while households in the bottom 10% see their income go down.
All of this puts the country's financial path in a pretty stark light. You have budget watchdogs like the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget basically sounding the alarm, warning that if something doesn't change, the country is heading towards an unsustainable level of debt. And so, we're left with two very different stories. The president's speech painted a picture of a new golden age, but the data from government analysts and independent groups points to a much more complex financial path, one with some really big challenges ahead. The question, I guess, is which of these two stories will end up defining the years to come? Thanks for joining this explainer.